Captain Hyunwoo stood on the bridge of the Soul's Pride and watched the distant explosions light up the darkness of space like deadly fireworks. The war had been going on for 22 years now, and still the three alien races kept fighting each other with no sign of stopping. He had been stationed here at the edge of contested space for 3 years, watching this endless conflict, and every day it seemed to get worse. The Vellani Empire controlled most of the inner systems with their powerful energy weapons that could cut through almost any armor. Their ships were sleek and white like polished bones, and they moved through space with deadly grace. The Vellani themselves were tall and thin with pale blue skin and large black eyes that never seemed to blink. They believed they were the most advanced race in the galaxy and treated everyone else like children playing with dangerous toys. On the other side were the Hive Collective with their massive swarms of insect-like creatures that could overwhelm any enemy through sheer numbers. Their ships looked like giant metal beetles covered in spikes, and they moved in perfect formation like a living cloud of death. The Hive creatures had 6 legs and hard shell-like skin that could stop most weapons. They worked together as one mind and never retreated, no matter how many of them died. Caught between these two powerful enemies were the Depths Federation, who lived in the underwater cities of ocean worlds. They had blue-green skin and gills that let them breathe both air and water. Their ships were round and smooth like bubbles, and they fought using sonic weapons that could shake apart enemy vessels. The Depths Federation was the weakest of the 3 powers, but they were smart and knew how to survive by making deals and hiding in places the others could not follow. Hyunwoo had studied all 3 races during his time here, and he found their war both fascinating and terrible. Each side had their own reasons for fighting, and none of them seemed willing to give up. The Vellani wanted to spread their advanced civilization across the galaxy. The Hive Collective needed more worlds to feed their growing population. The Depths Federation just wanted to be left alone to live in peace on their water worlds. But none of the 3 races paid much attention to humanity. Earth had only joined the galactic community 15 years ago when humans finally developed, faster than light travel. Most aliens saw humans as primitive newcomers who barely understood the technology they were using. Human ships were ugly and functional compared to the elegant designs of other races. Human weapons were simple kinetic, projectiles instead of advanced energy beams. Human tactics were basic and unpredictable instead of following proper military doctrine. Admiral Bo-Ra of the Vellani Empire had met with human diplomats twice, and both times she had dismissed them as irrelevant. The Vellani considered humans to be at least 50 years behind their technology and possibly 1,000 years behind their understanding of proper civilization. When human ambassadors requested trade agreements, Bo-Ra had politely refused, saying that humans had nothing of value to offer. Hive Queen Mira was even less interested in humanity. The collective mind that controlled billions of insect warriors could not understand how individual humans could function without being connected to each other. To the Hive, humans seemed chaotic and weak because they could not work together as one perfect unit. Mira had never even bothered to meet with human representatives. Only Chancellor Tae-jin of the Depths Federation showed any real curiosity about the strange newcomers from Earth. His scientists had studied human behavior and found it puzzling but interesting. Humans seemed to adapt to new situations faster than other races, and they showed unusual creativity in solving problems. Tae-jin had approved several small trade deals with human colonies, and he often wondered what humans might accomplish if they had more time to develop. On the bridge of Seoul's Pride Communications Officer, So-young looked up from her station with a worried expression on her face. She had been monitoring the alien communication channels for weeks, trying to understand the current phase of the war. So-young was one of the best xenolinguists in the human fleet, and she could speak all 3 alien languages fluently. "Captain, the fighting is getting closer to our position," So-young reported. "The Vellani are pushing into this sector with a major offensive, and the Hive is sending reinforcements to stop them. We might need to move back to safer coordinates." Hyunwoo nodded and studied the tactical display showing the positions of the various fleets. The war had been mostly static for the past 5 years, with neither side able to gain a decisive advantage. But recently the Vellani had developed new shield technology that made their ships even harder to destroy. They were using this advantage to push deeper into Hive territory than they had managed in years. "Any word from Earth about new orders?" Hyunwoo asked his first officer, Lieutenant Jae-sung. "Nothing yet, sir. Command still wants us to maintain our observation post here and gather intelligence on alien tactics and technology. They specifically ordered us not to get involved in the fighting, no matter what happens. This had been humanity's policy since joining the galactic community. Earth's leaders believed that humans needed to learn and grow stronger before they could play a role in galactic politics. The three alien races were so far ahead of human technology that any attempt to join the war would likely result in the complete destruction of humanity's small fleet. Dr. So Young had been working on her latest research project in the science lab when the alert sirens started blaring throughout the ship. She was studying samples of alien technology that human scouts had recovered from old battlefields, hoping to understand how the different races had developed such advanced weapons. So Young was particularly interested in Vellani energy shields and hive biotechnology. The research station Harmony Base had been So Young's home for 2 years before she transferred to Soul's Pride. 12 human scientists worked there studying alien artifacts and trying to develop new technologies that might help humanity catch up to the galactic standard. The station was hidden in an asteroid field far from any inhabited systems, and all three alien races considered it to be uninhabited space. Harmony Base sent regular reports to Earth about their discoveries, and they had made several important breakthroughs in understanding alien science. The scientists there were some of the brightest minds humanity had to offer, and they worked day and night to unlock the secrets that might secure humanity's future among the stars. When the Vellani attack fleet entered the asteroid field, they were pursuing a damaged hive cruiser that had been separated from its main group. The Vellani ships used their advanced sensors to track the enemy vessel through the floating rocks, and they fired their energy weapons at anything that might be hiding their target. The attack was quick and efficient, and the Vellani never realized that there were humans living in the asteroid field. Harmony Base had no military defenses because it was supposed to be secret and safe. When the Vellani energy beams hit the station, the 12 scientists inside had no warning and no chance to escape. Dr. So Young was conducting an experiment on hive biotechnology when the station's hull was torn apart by enemy fire. Her final transmission to Soul's Pride was cut off in the middle of a sentence about a promising new discovery. Captain Hyun Woo received the emergency signal from Harmony Base just as the Vellani fleet was leaving the asteroid field. By the time Soul's Pride arrived at the station's coordinates, there was nothing left but scattered debris and the frozen bodies of 12 human researchers floating in the vacuum of space. The attack had been a mistake, and the Vellani probably never knew they had killed anyone. The news of the attack spread quickly through the human fleet and then back to Earth, where it caused an uproar among government leaders and ordinary citizens alike. For 22 years, humanity had watched the Galactic War from a safe distance, but now, human blood had been spilled. The 12 scientists at Harmony Base had died, not because they were threats to anyone, but simply because they were in the wrong place when aliens decided to kill each other. President Wu Jin called an emergency session of the Global Council to decide how humanity should respond to this unprovoked attack on their citizens. President Wu Jin sat at the head of the massive conference table in the Global Council chambers and looked at the faces of 200 world leaders who had gathered for this emergency session. The room was silent except for the quiet hum of translation devices that allowed representatives from every nation on Earth to understand each other perfectly. Everyone knew why they were here and the weight of the decision they had to make. 12 of our people are dead, Wu Jin said in a voice that carried to every corner of the room. They were scientists working to better humanity's place in the galaxy, and they were killed by aliens who didn't even know they existed. For 22 years we have stayed neutral in this galactic war, but neutrality did not protect our citizens when alien weapons destroyed Harmony Base. The debate that followed lasted for 18 hours as leaders argued about humanity's response to the attack. Some wanted to lodge a formal protest with the Vellani Empire and demand compensation for the lives lost. Others believed humanity should withdraw completely from contested space to avoid any future incidents. A few radical voices called for immediate military action against all three alien races. General Minho of the Earth Defense Forces stood up when his turn came to speak. He was a veteran of the last Earth Wars before humanity achieved global peace, and his scarred face showed the cost of those conflicts. "We cannot let this attack go unanswered," he said firmly. "If we show weakness now, the aliens will think they can kill humans whenever it suits their purposes. We must demonstrate that humanity will defend itself and its people. Foreign Minister Hanul disagreed strongly with the military approach. She had spent years building diplomatic relationships with the few alien races willing to talk to humanity, and she feared that any aggressive action would destroy all the progress they had made. We are not ready for war against any of these alien powers, she argued. Their technology is decades ahead of ours, and they have been fighting each other for over 20 years. If we attack them, they will crush us completely. The debate continued through the night as representatives weighed the risks of action against the dangers of inaction. Everyone understood that this decision would determine humanity's future in the galaxy. They could remain peaceful observers and hope the aliens would respect their neutrality, or they could take a stand and risk everything in a fight they might not be able to win. When the final vote was called, the result was unanimous. Every single representative voted to authorize military action against the alien forces responsible for the attack on Harmony Base. Humanity would no longer stand idle while alien races treated human lives as worthless. The age of human neutrality was over. Colonel Jae-hyuk received his orders while his battle group was conducting training exercises near Jupiter. He was to take 12 human warships into contested space and engage any alien forces that threatened human interests. It was the first time in human history that their military would fight against alien enemies, and everyone knew the odds were heavily against them. The human fleet was small compared to the massive armadas that the three alien races could deploy. Earth had only 37 warships total, and most of them were needed to defend human colonies from pirates and raiders. Jae-hyuk's force represented 1/3 of humanity's entire military strength, and if his mission failed, there might not be enough ships left to protect Earth itself. But the human ships had advantages that the aliens did not expect. While the Villani focused on energy weapons and the Hive relied on biotechnology, and the Depths Federation used sonic attacks, humans had developed a variety of different weapon systems. Human ships carried kinetic cannons that fired solid projectiles at incredible speeds, along with missile launchers and rail guns and even old-fashioned chemical explosives. Lieutenant Ha-Nul was the best pilot in the human fleet, and she had studied alien fighter tactics for years while serving aboard observation ships. She knew that Villani pilots followed strict formation protocols, and Hive fighters moved in perfect synchronization, while Depths Federation pilots preferred hit-and-run attacks from unexpected angles. Human pilots had trained to fight against all three styles, but they had also developed their own unpredictable approach to combat. The first engagement happened near the outer edge of Villani space, when Jae-hyuk's fleet encountered a patrol of 6 enemy warships. The Villani commander immediately sent a message demanding that the primitive humans leave this sector or face destruction. Admiral Bo-Ra had given clear orders that human ships were not to be allowed in Villani territory under any circumstances. Jae-hyuk responded by opening fire with every weapon his fleet possessed. The Villani ships activated their energy shields, expecting to deflect laser beams and plasma bolts, but the human kinetic rounds passed right through the defensive barriers as if they were not there. Solid metal projectiles traveling at enormous speeds slammed into Villani hulls and tore through armor that was designed to stop energy weapons. The alien pilots were completely unprepared for this type of attack. Their shields could absorb and redirect energy, but they could not stop physical objects from reaching their targets. Within minutes, 3 Villani ships had been destroyed, and the other 3 were retreating toward their main fleet while broadcasting urgent warnings about the unexpected human weapons. Hanul led the fighter attack that finished off the retreating enemy vessels. Her squadron of 12 human fighters moved in loose formation that confused the Villani targeting systems, which were programmed to track neat, organized groups. The human pilots changed direction constantly and used seemingly random attack patterns that made it impossible for enemy computers to predict their movements. When Ha-Nul fired her kinetic cannons at the lead Villani ship, the projectiles punched through the enemy's shields and hull in a shower of sparks and metal fragments. It was the first time a human pilot had achieved a confirmed kill against an alien warship, and the moment would be remembered as the beginning of humanity's rise to galactic power. Engineer Dong-hyun watched the battle from the command ship's technical station where he monitored the performance of human weapons against alien defenses. He had helped design many of the systems that were proving so effective against the Volani, and he felt a mixture of pride and fear as he saw the results of his work. The human approach to military technology was fundamentally different from what the alien races had developed. Where the Volani had perfected energy weapons and shields, the Hive had focused on biological systems that could heal and adapt, and the Depths Federation had mastered sonic technology that could disrupt enemy equipment. But humans had never specialized in any single area. Human military doctrine was based on redundancy and flexibility. Every human ship carried multiple types of weapons so that if one system failed or proved ineffective against a particular enemy, there were always alternatives available. Human engineers had studied alien technology for 15 years, and they had designed countermeasures for every known defense system. The kinetic weapons that were devastating Volani shields had been developed specifically because human scientists noticed that alien energy barriers could not stop solid objects. The missile systems were designed to overwhelm Hive point defense networks through sheer numbers. The electronic warfare packages could disrupt Depths Federation sonic weapons by interfering with their frequency modulation. But the most important advantage humans possessed was not technological, but tactical. The three alien races had been fighting each other for so long that their strategies had become predictable and rigid. Volani fleets always formed perfect geometric patterns and attacked in coordinated waves. Hive swarms moved as single organisms with every ship following the same programmed responses. Depths Federation forces relied on mobility and stealth, but they always retreated when faced with superior numbers. Human military thinking was chaotic by alien standards. Human commanders were trained to adapt their tactics constantly based on changing battlefield conditions. Human pilots were encouraged to act independently and use their own judgment instead of following predetermined flight paths. Human ships could change their weapon configurations in the middle of battle to counter enemy defenses. The news of the first human victory spread quickly throughout the galaxy as the surviving Volani ships reported their encounter to Admiral Bo-Ra. The alien commander found it difficult to believe that primitive human technology had destroyed 3 of her advanced warships, but the evidence was undeniable. For the first time in decades, the Volani Empire had suffered a military defeat at the hands of a race they had considered inferior. Bo-Ra immediately ordered her intelligence officers to analyze everything they knew about human capabilities and intentions. The reports they produced were disturbing and confusing. Human technology appeared to be decades behind Volani standards, but it was also completely different from anything the Empire had encountered before. Human tactics seemed random and chaotic, but they had achieved results that careful Volani planning had failed to match. The Hive Collective also took notice of the human victory, though Queen Mira's reaction was more puzzled than concerned. The collective mind could not understand how individual human pilots could coordinate their attacks without being mentally linked to each other. Admiral Bo-Ra stood in the command center of her flagship and studied the holographic displays showing human ship movements throughout the contested sector. For 3 weeks, she had been trying to understand the tactical patterns used by the primitive newcomers, but every analysis produced contradictory results. Human fleets seemed to follow no logical doctrine, and their commanders made decisions that violated every principle of proper military science. The most recent engagement had been particularly frustrating for the Volani forces. Bo-Ra had deployed her ships in a standard pincer formation designed to trap the human fleet between 2 groups of superior firepower. It was a classic maneuver that had worked against both Hive and Depths Federation forces countless times over the years. But the humans had responded by splitting their formation into 3 separate groups that attacked from completely different directions. According to Volani military theory, this should have resulted in the destruction of the smaller human groups, as they faced overwhelming numbers. Instead, the human ships had coordinated their attacks so perfectly that all 3 Volani formations were engaged simultaneously, and none could provide support to the others. The humans had turned a tactical disadvantage into a strategic victory through methods that made no sense to trained Volani officers. Commander Kyung-Soo received the urgent transmission from Earth Fleet Command while his squadron was patrolling the border between Hive and Depths Federation territory. Long-range sensors had detected a massive Hive swarm moving toward the human colony world of New Seoul, where 50,000 civilians lived and worked in agricultural settlements. The colony had no military defenses and could not evacuate its population before the enemy arrived. Kyung-soo's force consisted of only 8 warships against a hive swarm of over 200 vessels. Direct combat was impossible, but the human commander had studied hive psychology extensively, and he believed there might be another way to stop the attack. The insectoid aliens had evolved from hive insects on their homeworld, and they retained many of the instincts and fears of their ancestors despite their advanced technology. When the hive swarm entered the new Sol system, Kyung-soo's ships were waiting in orbit around the colony world. Instead of opening fire immediately, the human commander activated his communications array and began broadcasting a signal that the hive ships would be unable to ignore. The transmission contained audio recordings from Earth's pest control industry, including the sounds of insecticide sprayers and electronic bug zappers and extermination equipment. The psychological impact on the hive forces was immediate and devastating. The alien pilots heard the sounds that their species had evolved to, fear above all others, and their formation began to break apart as individual ships tried to escape what they perceived as a deadly threat. Queen Mira's mental control over her warriors was disrupted by primal terror that overrode rational thought. Dr. Ye-jin watched the results of the psychological warfare attack from her position aboard the research vessel that was monitoring the engagement. As a xenopsychologist, she had spent years studying the mental patterns of different alien races, and she had developed the theoretical framework that Kyung-soo was now testing in actual combat. The Hive Collective's greatest strength was also its greatest weakness, because shared consciousness meant shared fears. "The swarm is in complete disarray," reported the sensor operator. "Individual ships are breaking formation, and some of them are actually firing on their own allies. The Queen's control over her forces has collapsed completely." Ye-jin nodded as she watched the data streaming across her displays. The human attack had not destroyed a single enemy vessel, but it had accomplished something far more valuable by demonstrating that the supposedly invincible hive mind could be disrupted through carefully applied psychological pressure. This victory would change how every race in the galaxy viewed the insectoid threat. News of the human success against the hive swarm spread throughout the contested regions within hours, as both Villani and Depths Federation observers reported what they had witnessed. The idea that the collective mind could be broken by psychological warfare was revolutionary, because it suggested new ways to fight an enemy that had seemed unstoppable for decades. Chancellor Tae-jin immediately ordered his scientists to study the human methods and develop similar weapons for use by Depths Federation forces. The aquatic aliens had always been the weakest of the 3 major powers, but they were also the most adaptable, and they quickly recognized the potential of human psychological warfare techniques. Captain Sung Ho received orders to establish formal contact with Depths Federation military commanders and explore the possibility of cooperation between human and aquatic forces. Earth's leadership had decided that humanity needed allies in the galactic conflict, and the Depths Federation seemed like the most reasonable choice among the 3 alien powers. The first joint operation between human and Depths Federation forces took place in the Coral Nebula, where a Villani battle group had been trapped by their own tactical mistakes. Admiral Bo-Ra had sent the ships to secure a strategic asteroid mining facility, but they had been caught between a hive patrol and a stellar phenomenon that interfered with their navigation systems. Sung Ho's fleet approached the nebula from one direction, while Chancellor Tae-jin's ships moved in from the opposite side. The human and aquatic vessels had completely different designs and capabilities, but their commanders had worked out a joint strategy that took advantage of both forces' strengths. The Depths Federation ships used their sonic weapons to disrupt Villani shield harmonics, while human kinetic weapons exploited the gaps in enemy defenses. The battle lasted only 6 hours, but it resulted in the complete destruction of the trapped Villani force and the capture of the mining facility with its valuable resources. More importantly, it demonstrated that human adaptability could be combined effectively with alien technology and tactics to create new forms of warfare that neither side could achieve alone. Pilot Ji-woo became legendary throughout the human fleet for her ability to outmaneuver enemy fighters regardless of their origin or capabilities. She had developed flying techniques that seemed impossible to alien minds trained in rigid combat protocols, where Villani pilots followed predetermined flight paths and hive fighters moved in perfect synchronization. Jiwoo changed direction constantly and used her ship's momentum in ways that defied conventional understanding. During one engagement against a mixed force of Volani and Hive fighters, Jiwoo's squadron was outnumbered 5-1, but still managed to achieve victory through superior tactics and unpredictable movements. The human pilots used their enemies' own strengths against them by baiting Volani formations into collision courses with Hive swarms. The aliens were so focused on maintaining their proper positions that they could not adapt quickly enough to avoid disaster. "Human pilots don't follow any recognizable pattern," complained one Volani flight instructor after studying recordings of Jiwoo's combat maneuvers. "They seem to make random decisions, but somehow these decisions always work in their favor. It's as if they can predict the future or read our minds." The truth was much simpler but no less effective. Human pilots were trained to observe their enemies constantly and adapt their tactics based on what they saw happening in real time. Where alien pilots relied on predetermined responses to standard situations, humans improvised solutions to unique problems. This flexibility gave them enormous advantages in combat situations that changed rapidly. The psychological impact of human unpredictability became as important as their tactical victories. Volani commanders began second-guessing their own decisions because they could never be certain how humans would respond to any given situation. Hive pilots lost their perfect coordination as individual warriors tried to anticipate human actions that followed no logical pattern. Even the Depths Federation found human behavior difficult to predict despite their growing alliance. Chancellor Tae-jin's advisors warned him that humans might abandon their partnership at any moment for reasons that made sense only to human minds. But Tae-jin had studied human psychology extensively, and he believed that their chaotic nature could be channeled rather than controlled. The war entered a new phase as all three alien races were forced to reconsider their assumptions about combat and strategy. Conflicts that had been locked in stalemate for years suddenly became fluid, as human intervention changed the balance of power. Ancient enemies found themselves fighting battles they had never planned for against an opponent they did not understand. Queen Mira of the Hive Collective attempted to develop new tactics that could counter human psychological warfare, but her efforts were hampered by the very nature of her species' shared consciousness. Every innovation she created was immediately known to all her warriors, but it was also vulnerable to disruption by human methods that targeted the collective mind. Admiral Bora faced similar challenges as she tried to adapt Volani doctrine to account for human unpredictability. Her officers had been trained to fight according to established principles that had served the Empire well for centuries, but these principles assumed that enemies would behave rationally and follow recognizable patterns. General Minho stood before the massive holographic display in Earth's Strategic Command Center and studied the three-dimensional map that showed the current positions of all military forces throughout the contested galaxy. Red markers indicated Volani Empire fleets, while green showed Hive Collective swarms and blue represented Depths Federation squadrons. The newest additions to the display were the yellow markers that tracked human forces now operating in 12 different star systems. For 6 months, human fleets had been disrupting the established patterns of galactic warfare, and the results were becoming impossible for anyone to ignore. Stalemates that had lasted for years were suddenly breaking open as human intervention shifted the balance of power in unexpected directions. The three alien races were being forced to fight a completely different kind of war, and none of them were adapting well to the change. "Operation Wildcard is ready for implementation," reported Colonel Jae-hyuk from his position at the Tactical Planning Station. "All human fleets are in position, and our Depths Federation allies have confirmed their participation in the coordinated assault. We will be targeting Volani command structures and Hive production centers simultaneously across 8 star systems." The plan was ambitious beyond anything humanity had attempted before. Instead of focusing on a single enemy or a single objective, human forces would attack both the Volani Empire and the Hive Collective at the same time while working with Depths Federation allies to maximize the confusion and disruption. No military strategist from any of the alien races would consider such a plan because it violated every principle of concentration of force and unity of command. But General Minho had studied the psychological profiles of all three alien species, and he understood that their greatest weakness was their inability to adapt to truly unexpected situations. The Volani planned everything in advance and could not function effectively when their careful preparations were disrupted. The Hive relied on coordinated responses that became chaotic when forced to split their attention. The Depths Federation would benefit from the confusion among their enemies and might finally have a chance to achieve some of their strategic objectives. Scientist Su Jin worked frantically in her laboratory aboard the research station orbiting Mars as she put the finishing touches on the hybrid technologies that would give human forces their edge in the upcoming battle. For months, she had been combining abandoned alien research with human engineering principles to create weapons and defense systems that surpassed anything any single race had developed. The breakthrough had come when Su Jin realized that the three alien races had each specialized so completely in their chosen technologies that they had abandoned entire fields of research that seemed less promising. Volani energy weapons were incredibly advanced, but the Empire had never bothered to develop effective kinetic defenses. Hive biotechnology was revolutionary, but the Collective had ignored electronic warfare systems. Depths Federation sonic weapons were sophisticated, but they had no countermeasures against psychological attacks. Human engineers had studied all these abandoned technologies and found ways to combine them into hybrid systems that were more versatile than anything the aliens possessed. A human warship might carry Volani-style energy shields powered by Hive bioelectric cells and controlled by Depths Federation sonic computers. The result was a defensive system that could adapt to any type of attack because it incorporated elements from all three alien approaches. "The new hybrid drives are ready for installation," Su Jin reported to her supervisor. "Our ships will be able to match Volani speed while maintaining Hive durability and Depths Federation stealth capabilities. The aliens won't know what hit them." Admiral Bora felt something she had never experienced before as she reviewed the latest intelligence reports about human military capabilities. Her species had no word for the emotion that humans would recognize as anxiety, but the Volani commander found herself unable to sleep properly and constantly checking her security arrangements. The rigid hierarchy that had served the Empire for thousands of years was beginning to show cracks under the pressure of fighting an unpredictable enemy. The most disturbing report came from her intelligence officers, who had been studying human combat recordings for weeks trying to understand their tactical methods. The analysis showed that human commanders seemed to make decisions based on intuition and incomplete information rather than following proper military science. They acted quickly without gathering all available data, and they changed their plans constantly as situations developed. According to Volani military theory, this approach should result in disaster because proper planning required complete information and careful analysis of all possible outcomes. But somehow, the humans achieved better results than Volani forces that followed established doctrine and took time to gather all relevant intelligence before making decisions. "Their methods are completely illogical," complained the chief intelligence officer. "They split their forces when they should concentrate them, and they attack when they should retreat, and they retreat when they should attack. But every time we predict what they will do based on proper military principles, they do something else, and it works." Bora studied the tactical displays showing human fleet movements and tried to find some pattern she could understand and counter. But the more she analyzed human behavior, the more confused she became. It was as if the humans were playing an entirely different game with rules that made no sense to anyone else. Hive Queen Mira faced even greater challenges as she struggled to maintain control over her vast collective consciousness. The shared mind that allowed billions of individual warriors to function as a single organism was being disrupted by the constant need to respond to human attacks that targeted multiple locations simultaneously. For the first time in the collective's history, Mira found herself unable to coordinate all her forces effectively because human psychological warfare kept breaking her mental connections with individual units. Whenever she focused her attention on one threatened position, the humans would attack somewhere else and force her to divide her consciousness again. The Queen's advisors recommended concentrating all Hive forces in a few heavily defended positions that could not be overwhelmed by human attacks. But this strategy would mean abandoning most of the territory the Collective had conquered over decades of warfare. Worse, it would give the humans even more freedom to disrupt Hive operations through their unpredictable tactics. "The human mind poison spreads through our consciousness like a disease," reported one of the senior advisors. Individual warriors are beginning to think for themselves instead of following collective guidance. If this continues, our entire civilization may collapse into chaos. Chancellor Tae-jin watched the preparations for Operation Wildcard from his command ship in the Depths Federation fleet and marveled at the way human planners coordinated such a complex operation. His own species was known for careful planning and patient execution, but human military organizations seemed to thrive on chaos and last-minute changes. The joint planning sessions between human and Depths Federation officers had been educational for both sides. Tae-jin's commanders were meticulous and methodical, while human officers were creative and flexible. The combination produced strategies that neither side could have developed alone, and Tae-jin began to understand why humans had been so successful, despite their technological disadvantages. They planned for failure, observed his tactical advisor Young-sik after attending a human strategy meeting. Every human operation includes multiple backup plans and alternative objectives in case the primary mission cannot be completed. They assume that something will go wrong and they prepare for it in advance. This approach was foreign to Depths Federation thinking because aquatic culture emphasized harmony and avoiding conflict whenever possible. But Tae-jin could see the practical advantages of planning for multiple outcomes instead of assuming that everything would proceed according to schedule. When Operation Wildcard began, the results exceeded even General Min-ho's optimistic projections. Human fleets struck Volani command centers in 4 different star systems, while simultaneously attacking hive production facilities in 4 other locations. The aliens had expected humanity to choose one target or the other, but not both at the same time. The Volani Empire found itself fighting a 2-front war as human forces attacked from one direction, while Depths Federation allies struck from another. Admiral Bo-Ra tried to coordinate her response, but every time she sent reinforcements to one threatened position, the humans would shift their attacks to a different location. The Hive Collective faced similar problems, as Queen Mira struggled to maintain control over forces that were being hit from multiple directions simultaneously. The shared consciousness that was the collective's greatest strength became a liability as psychological warfare attacks disrupted communication between individual units and their queen. Within 72 hours, both alien powers were forced to admit that their traditional strategies were inadequate against human methods. The Volani began pulling back from exposed positions while the Hive started consolidating their forces in heavily defended strongholds. Both actions represented Admiral Jun-ho commanded the largest human fleet ever assembled as it approached the Nexus station in the heart of the contested galaxy. The massive space facility served as a strategic hub that all 3 alien races considered vital to their war efforts. Control of the Nexus meant control of the major trade routes and communication networks that connected dozens of star systems. For 22 years, the station had changed hands multiple times as the Volani Empire and Hive Collective and Depths Federation fought for possession of this critical asset. Now humanity was about to change the rules of the game entirely. Jun-ho's battle plan defied every principle of military logic because instead of trying to capture the Nexus station, he intended to make it worthless to everyone. The human fleet carried enough explosive charges to destroy the entire facility and eliminate it as a strategic objective for any faction in the war. All fleets report ready for final approach, announced Communications Officer Yoon-ji from her position on the flagship's bridge. Volani forces are holding the outer defensive perimeter while Hive units control the inner sections. Depths Federation ships are maintaining position at the edge of the system, waiting to see what develops. The 3 alien races had established an unofficial truce around the Nexus station because none of them could afford to see it fall under complete control of their enemies. Admiral Bo-Ra commanded 12 Volani warships with their advanced energy weapons, while Hive Queen Mira had deployed 30 insectoid vessels with biotechnology weapons. Chancellor Tae-jin's smaller force of 8 Depths Federation ships served as neutral observers, who would join whichever side seemed likely to prevent total domination by the others. Jun-ho opened communications channels to all 3 alien fleets simultaneously and delivered the message that would shake the foundations of galactic civilization. This is Admiral Jun-ho of the Human Defense Forces. The Nexus station has been the cause of endless warfare and the deaths of millions of beings from all our species. Today we offer you a choice between negotiation and mutual destruction. The alien commanders were puzzled by this transmission because humans had never shown any interest in the Nexus station before. Admiral Bora assumed it was some kind of trick or bluff, while Queen Mira analyzed the human fleet's strength and concluded that they posed no serious threat to the combined alien forces. Chancellor Tae Jin was more cautious because he had learned to take human announcements seriously. Lieutenant Yoon Ji led the first wave of boarding shuttles that approached the station's docking bays, while the alien fleets were still trying to understand human intentions. Her Marines moved quickly through the corridors using maps that human intelligence had developed through months of careful observation. The boarding parties had a single mission that would determine the outcome of the entire Galactic War. Marine Seok Jin and his squad carried the explosive charges that would transform the Nexus station from a strategic prize into a worthless piece of debris. The human plan was elegantly simple and completely unexpected. Instead of fighting for control of the facility, they would demonstrate their willingness to destroy it rather than allow it to remain a source of conflict. Charges are in position throughout the primary support structures, Seok Jin reported as his team completed their mission. We can bring down the entire station in approximately 30 minutes if the Admiral gives the order. The alien commanders received this information with shock and disbelief. Admiral Bora immediately ordered her ships to attack the human fleet before they could carry out their threat, but Junho had anticipated this response. Human vessels had been positioned to use the station itself as a shield against Villani energy weapons, while their own kinetic cannons could fire through the facility's open docking bays. Queen Mira faced an even more difficult decision, because any attack on the human fleet might result in damage to the Nexus station that would make it useless, even if the Hive Collective captured it. The shared consciousness that normally gave her perfect coordination with all her forces was fragmenting under the stress of this unprecedented situation. Chancellor Tae Jin recognized the brilliance of the human strategy and immediately opened private communications with Admiral Junho to discuss possible alternatives to mutual destruction. The Depths Federation had always preferred negotiation to warfare, and Tae Jin saw an opportunity to end the galactic conflict through human mediation, rather than alien victory. "Your plan will work," Tae Jin told the human admiral during their private conversation. "None of our races can accept the loss of the Nexus station, but none of us can prevent you from destroying it if you are determined to do so. What terms would humanity accept for preserving this facility?" Junho had been waiting for this question, and his answer had been prepared by Earth's diplomatic corps working with President Wu Jin himself. "We propose a permanent ceasefire between all parties and the establishment of a neutral zone around the Nexus station, administered by a joint council with representatives from all 4 races, including humanity." The negotiations that followed were conducted aboard the human flagship Busan Dawn, while the explosive charges remained in place throughout the station's infrastructure. Captain Haiwan served as the primary mediator because her diplomatic training and psychological expertise made her ideal for managing discussions between species with fundamentally different ways of thinking. Admiral Bora participated in the talks reluctantly because she had been ordered by the Villani Empire to prevent the destruction of the station at any cost. But as the discussions continued, she began to understand that humanity offered something the galaxy had never seen before. Human unpredictability that had made them formidable enemies could also make them effective peacekeepers, because none of the alien races could manipulate or deceive beings they could not predict. Queen Mira found the concept of permanent peace difficult to comprehend because the Hive Collective had evolved as conquerors who expanded constantly to feed their growing population. But the human proposal included provisions for controlled expansion into previously uninhabited star systems that would satisfy Hive needs without threatening other races. Chancellor Tae Jin emerged as humanity's strongest supporter during the negotiations because he recognized that human mediation offered his people their best hope for long-term survival. The Depths Federation had been losing the three-way war slowly but steadily, and without human intervention, they would eventually be conquered by either the Villani Empire or the Hive Collective. The peace treaty that emerged from these discussions was unlike anything in galactic history because it did not simply end the current war, but established permanent mechanisms for preventing future conflicts. The Nexus Station would become neutral territory administered by a joint council, where disputes between races could be resolved through negotiation rather than warfare. President Wu Jin arrived from Earth to sign the treaty on behalf of humanity, and his presence added weight to the historic ceremony. The human leader had traveled further than any Earth president in history to attend a diplomatic event that would reshape the entire galaxy. His speech to the assembled representatives became one of the most quoted documents in galactic political science. "We did not join your war to conquer territory or impose our will upon other races," Wu Jin declared as he signed the peace agreement. "We joined this conflict to teach the galaxy that some problems can only be solved by those willing to change the rules entirely. Today we prove that peace is possible when all parties are willing to accept something different from total victory." The treaty signing ceremony was broadcast throughout the galaxy and reached billions of beings who had lived with constant warfare for over 2 decades. The idea that the great powers could cooperate instead of fighting seemed impossible to many observers, but the human threat to destroy the Nexus station had made cooperation the only rational choice. Admiral Bora found herself serving as the Volani representative on the new Nexus Council, despite her initial opposition to the peace agreement. Over time, she came to appreciate the advantages of having neutral arbitrators who could not be influenced by traditional diplomatic pressure. Human unpredictability that had been so frustrating in warfare proved valuable in peacekeeping because it prevented any single race from gaming the system. Queen Mira struggled more with the transition to peaceful coexistence because the Hive Collective had never learned to function without external enemies to unite against. But human mediators helped her people develop new social structures that channeled their aggressive instincts into exploration and scientific research rather than conquest and warfare. Chancellor Te Jin became humanity's closest ally among the alien races, and his support was crucial during the difficult early years of the peace process. The Depths Federation served as a bridge between human thinking and alien psychology, because their aquatic culture had always emphasized adaptation and flexibility. The galaxy entered a new age of cooperation and controlled competition as the 4 major races learned to work together through the mechanisms established by the peace treaty. Trade agreements replaced military alliances while scientific exchanges substituted for intelligence-gathering operations.